Making some wax patterns, so let's get into it. All right, well, let's talk about this wax injector. We're going to be talking about the wax injector, and we're going to be shooting some rubber molds, and we're going to be making some wax patterns. Okay, now and what you're going to need, of course, you're going to need a wax injector, and you're going to need some good jewelry wax. Okay, I'll see if I can work a little bit with this camera. You'll have to forgive me, I'm a little bit cluttered up in the garage today. I've been moving a lot of stuff around, and I just got so much stuff out here. But there it is. I wanted to show you this this wax right here is this is the wax I use. This is some really good wax, and it's the cheapest wax I've found, and it's really good. You can look for it. I believe I got this on Amazon for the best price, but you can look for that wax. Okay, it's really good. All right, now what we're gonna be working with, we got our wax, and we got our wax injector. Right here is our wax injector. Okay, and then we're gonna be shooting. We're going to be shooting some rubber molds. Okay, got a lot of molds here. We're going to be shooting some wax in these rubber molds. Now, a little bit about the molds. All these molds, I want to run all these molds today. Well, pretty much, while I'm working here. These are ones I'm wanting to run, but I want to show you along with this type of a rubber mold here. This is just your conventional basic conventional mold here. That it's a rubber mold, and the way these are made with a special type of jewelry rubber. Okay, and then to make these molds, what you gotta have a few things to work with. Okay, you basically have to have some frames that you put your rubber in, and then you gotta have a vulcanizer. Okay, so you put your pattern in there, and then you put your rubber in your frame, and then you vulcanize it. Okay, now that's the traditional way of making these kind of molds, but I want to also just really quickly and briefly, another thing, this is another mold here. Alright, now this is a mold that I made. I'm gonna shoot this mold here in a second, but this is a mold that I made. And so you can see this is a pretty good sized cross in there. And basically I went to Walmart and I seen a real nice cross that I liked. And I brought it home and I made a mold off of it so that I could make me some wax patterns and, make me some crosses out of silver. But watch for my videos on mold making. I'm going to cover all this, but this mold right here in particular is very, very, very easy and very, very cheap to make. It's super cheap, it's super easy, and I'll cover making these types and those types of molds, but today we're talking about the wax injector. Alright, so now the first thing I want to say is, when you set up your wax injector, what you want to do is you want to have a table that's real smooth. Okay, maybe for mica, I put these floor tiles down on my bench. But here's what I do, and this is a good thing to do. I got some mold release. This is really good stuff here, and what I do with this this mold release, one thing is I put it on all my molds, okay, and it keeps them, you know, it keeps the rubber soft and pliable, and it really makes it great. It's good. It helps your wax pieces will just come right out. A lot of people say you don't have to worry about lubricating the molds and all that. Well, I like to lubricate mine, but I take this, I sell this on my website. This is just a real good mold release, and it's good. It's good for any kind of things you do with molds. I mean, I work with plaster and hydrocal and rubber and latex. I work with all kinds of stuff, and this is the best that I've ever found. But you see, I take this mold release right here, and I rub it down on my table, okay? Right? My whole table here where I'm working, I give it a nice little rub down. Now, why I do that is because when I'm shooting molds, all right, I'm going to have a wax that's going to get onto this table, and I got this coating on here, a mold release, so that wax will come right off of there, and then my table is perfectly clean. So at the end of my run of shooting molds, you know, I'll have all this kind of stuff. I guess you can see all right. I'll have all this kind of stuff, and it comes right off my table. It's perfectly clean because I got it clean to start with. So then I just take all this stuff here and I throw it back into my wax injector, because the wax goes a long way, but it's really not cheap. I think I paid like $40 some for this 5-pound bag. But now it'll go a long way. That 5-pound bag will last you a long time. So basically, when you get your wax injector, you find you a good table, get a nice clean spot to work, and you don't have to, I highly recommend getting some of this mold release, because I put it on all my molds. I coat them lightly, and then I wipe them down, and they really come out really, really easy. Of course, you don't need this. A lot of people use baby powder. I don't like that. A lot of people use cornstarch. I don't like that either. But I use this release agent in all my molds. It keeps them coated. And I got a bunch of other molds. See, these are a little bit dirty. I was sawing some stuff, and a little bit of dust got over here. But I got a bunch of molds. Like, see, I made all these. These are cabochons, okay? And I got all different. But I make my own cabochons, and I make my own stones. I'll cover all that later too. But back to this wax injector. So you get you a wax injector, and you're going to have to hook it up to some air. Okay, now these things don't need very much air at all. Okay, we're talking maybe around 5 pounds, 3 to 5 pounds of pressure. Okay, now it really, you're going to find when you start running molds, as far as air pressure, different molds sometimes will take a different amount of pressure to get them to come out. Okay, there's all different, you know, every mold is a little bit different, but on average, you got about 5 pounds of pressure up here, and you got on top right here, you got a pressure gauge, okay? But this is just a simple little fitting, and all that is just a little, I just got a little piece of tubing, Okay, and I'll see if I can show you. And down here, hopefully I can show you. Right there, I got a little compressor, okay? It looks like my battery's gonna die, so I'll have to go change batteries, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back. My battery died. And I shot a few patterns while I was waiting on this battery to charge up, but there it is. There's my little compressor, and all it really is just a little old airbrush compressor. You don't need a big compressor. You don't even need hardly any air. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to run a wax injector, but that's what I got. It's an old air compressor. It's really old, but it's still running. So, but anyhow, I'll go back up here and talk a little bit more about the wax injector and stuff. Now this wax injector here, this one is I bought this thing, I don't know, I've had it 3 or 4 years at least. I can't even remember what I paid for it, but it's a cheaper wax injector. It's one of those, you know, made in China, but I'll tell you, this one right here has really been great, and it's done me really well. I shoot a lot of molds. I shoot molds pretty much almost every day. Sometimes not every day, but then sometimes I shoot a lot of molds, and I just leave mine. I leave mine hooked up pretty much. It's turned on all the time. It's plugged in and it's turned up, but there's a temperature gauge on the. It's around on the back side of this thing. I got this thing facing kind of backwards, but there's a temperature gauge on this thing. It's on the back side, but you can see there's the pressure gauge, and then there's my little airline. But the thing is, about this type of wax injector here, the reason I like this one is this has 2 nozzles. It has a nozzle on each side of it where I can have 2 people running this thing. I can have somebody working on this side. I can just scoot it over and I can have 2 people working. But it's got 2 nozzles on it, okay. But anyhow, about the temperature, when you first get this thing, what you want to do is you fill it. You open this top here up, and you fill it up with wax, and you set your temperature where you want it. I don't know if I can turn this around, but you set your temperature. Okay, you just turn it up until your wax starts melting. But I got this right here set, my dial. I don't know if yours will probably be different. You might be able to find the same thing as this. I think this is a pretty common one on the cheaper ones. I can't remember what I paid for this thing. Maybe about $250 or something like that. Maybe 300. I can't remember, but anyhow, I got my temperature gauge right here, if it means anything. I got that set on 95, and then there's a little light on the side here, and it'll come on and off whenever it needs to, keep the wax at that temperature. But basically, you want to shoot your wax at about 160 degrees. Is about what you want to shoot it at. That's about right, about 160 to maybe 170 or 80 at the high. You don't want to go over 180. I know that. You don't want to go that high on your temperature, but you can play around with it, you know, and just let your wax heat up, and then shoot a couple molds and see how, you know, see how it's working and stuff. And then you can adjust your pressure. Okay. Now normally you want to run about five pounds of pressure. Don't run it over 10 pounds. You don't ever need to run this over 10 pounds of air pressure. Okay. Because your pressure builds up in here, and then it don't take much. Okay, it don't take much at all. But around just around 160. But you can play with it, and you'll know. Now you may not want to leave yours on all the time, like I do. But I can't come out here when I need to shoot molds and have this thing cold, because it takes maybe a couple hours maybe for this whole thing to warm up and to get the wax all melted and get up to run operating temperature. So I can't come out here, you know, and wait. I mean, if you got, you know, just some couple molds that are starting out, you could probably wait, and it's not a big deal. But here's a cross I made, that mold I was showing you. That's a cross, kind of a good size cross. This thing takes about, it takes a good 1.5 ounces at least of silver. I'll cast this one. I'm going to cast this one in sand instead. But you can also use wax patterns for sand casting too. But I'll probably cast this one in sand, but instead of investment, just because it's a little bit bigger and it's a real basic, simple shape. So I'll sand. But this is a good example. I'll make a good $100, you know, at least just on this cross alone. I mean, it's, you know, I'm gonna make I usually make a nice bezel. Not a nice bezel, but I can't even think. A bail. I usually make a nice bail, you know, and set it up here on top. So that's just one thing I solder it on, and then, you know, buff it down real nice, and boom, there you go. But this is just an example. Here's 2 pieces of wax that I just made while my battery was charging up. This is actually an ingot. I use this square block here as an ingot for making sheet out of silver, and I use this rod shaped piece for drawing wire, for making wire. A lot of times when I'm running a lot of molds, I'll just go ahead and throw this ingot mold and this rod, you know, these 2 ingots in. I'll just throw these in a flask, and then when I'm pouring all my molds, I'll have me a couple ingots and you know, ready to go. It's just, to me, it's because I run quite a few, you know, at a time, so it's easier for me to just do that. Than I got an ingot mold, but I don't really much care for it. I make my ingots like this, because I made this mold right here. This is just a big rubber mold. It's like that mold that I made for that cross, but it's just, see, it's got my 2 ingots on it. Now I'll show you how to make these kind of molds. These are dirt cheap. Now these are the ones you really want to make a lot of these molds, because they're so cheap, and they come out nice. Here's a piece. You see this? Let me see if I can show you this. This is, come on. This thing's got a lot of, I don't know if I can get it to focus. Got a lot of fine detail on this cat right here. I don't know how to use a camera very well, but it's got real fine detail. And then on the back of it, see, it's got a textured, like a real fine textured pattern, okay? And these rubber molds like this, it'll pick up every bit of that detail. I mean, and then you just make you a pattern, and then when you got your wax pattern, you're good to go. You can make them all day long. But anyhow, I shot a few while my battery was charging up, but I'm gonna kind of give you a quick rundown. But that's what you do. You play around with your dial, you know, and just get it set to where it's the right temperature, and then just leave your dial there. And then when you plug it in, it'll warm up to that temperature, and then you'll be good to go. My compressor's a little bit loud on this thing because it's a small little compressor, but it's loud. But I'll just try to show you a quick, you know, maybe a quick, here's a mold that I run a lot of these. This is just a little small. It's, you know, it's a tiny little piece, but, you know, it's like those little crosses. I got a lot of little crosses, and there's big money in the crosses, like this tiny ones, because when you make all your wax patterns, and you can tree them up on a tree, and in a pretty good sized flask, you can put 100 or 150 of those little crosses on there, because they're tiny, they're real small. See, this is a small, tiny part, all right. But basically, how you work a wax injector, once you get your temperature set and you get your pressure set, all right. Now I'm going to show you. This thing's a little bit loud, so it'll make some noise. But I'm going to plug mine in. All right. All right, it's making some noise, but basically what you want to do, like I said, I got this mold release, and well, my camera shut off on me. I'm sorry about that, but I don't know where it shut off. But basically, you're just gonna shoot your wax in that little hole right there. If you can see that, there's a little bit of wax right there, you can see. But that's all, that's it. I mean, there's nothing to it. And then you're just going to let that cool. Let's shoot this one. This was my one that I made, the cheap molds. But boy, I'll tell you, they're good. For certain things, they're really good. Now, you just want to have a way to put some pressure, a little bit of pressure on it. I've got this in this little plastic thing that I made the mold in, but all I'm going to do is just stick it on there, push in, about like that, okay, and there we go. It's good to go. Now, we're going to let this cool. Now these things will cool down really fast, okay, but the best way to run molds is when you're running your molds, you want to shoot all your molds, okay, and stack them up, and then let them cool, all right, because they cool really fast. But the thing is, you don't want to try to rush on opening that mold up with the soft pattern, because when that wax is not solidified enough, your pattern's going to break off on you. Okay, and you see all this right here. See, this is stuff that I was running while my battery was charging, but they're not going to all come out. See, here's one. There's a little piece right here missing. Well, you know, these patterns, if they're not perfect, they're not any good. And you're not gonna, every pattern is not gonna come out, but most 90% will, or even more than that, once you get running. Here's a ring that I just made. it's a leaf, got leaf engraved with leaves all around it, but see, there was a tiny spot on it, tiny spot, but you know, it's not perfect. So when you go to cast jewelry, your wax has to be perfect. Now when they come out, maybe I can give you an example. I guess I could open this up. This might be soft, yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit soft, but because this is a big, thick part, I'll give that just a second to cool off. But you know, there's nothing to it at all. All you do, let me see. Some of these I already ran, but I gotta make a couple. Oh, here's one that I need right here. Let me get this one. All right, now this is a little cross in here. I sell a lot of these crosses and little religious. They're like little religious charms. Are really good. They sell good. So, all right, I'm gonna shoot this. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, there we go. I just got that. All right, I'll let that cool. I'm gonna turn this off because it's loud, a little bit loud. Okay, but anyhow, and this, you know, this just pushes in. It has a spring on it. Okay, now you're gonna get some wax build up on this. You just keep that clean, okay? And once in a while, not often, but this little hole on this nozzle will clog up. And if it does, you just go in there with a little piece of wire, and just go in there with a little piece of wire and clean that out. But you want to run your molds and you want to let them set a little bit. I mean, you know, it doesn't take forever. I mean, I'll try to see. This one's probably fine here to open up. Let's see now. See, a small little pattern is going to cool much quicker. See, this is a lot of wax. That piece is 1.5 ounces of silver or more. And look how thick that is. See, that's a lot of wax. So that's not going to cool right as fast. But your little thin patterns, yeah, see. Boy, it's hard to see. It's got a lot of detail. I know you're not going to be able to see all that detail on there, but it's got a lot of little fine detail. That's a tiny. This is like not even. This is not even maybe a little over 1/2 gram, maybe 3/4 gram of silver. And that's why I love these little small charms, because like I said, you can tree them up on a tree and pour it, make 50 or 100 or whatever you want to make, and then you can get you some cheap. They're good, but they're, you know, you don't pay much. They're sterling silver chains, nice sterling silver chains. The wholesale ones you got to shop around on eBay, but you get a nice sterling chain on this thing, and you pay about $1.50 for the chain, and then you put it on here, and you got about a $20 item. Okay, maybe 15 to 20 bucks on these. And this right here, all you do is you cut that sprue off of there. Okay, you just cut that sprue off and buff that out. It takes literally, you're talking 20 seconds to do that, and the piece is done. And you know, slap it on a chain, put it in your store, sell it online, however you're gonna sell your stuff. But that's why I love small stuff. Okay, but that's a basic rundown on the wax injector. There's not really much to it. Okay, you want to keep this thing pretty full of wax. Okay, you don't want to You don't want to let it get run down, way down low. That's, you want to keep it full. But like I said, all this stuff, see, I put that release agent on this bench, and look, it comes right off. Now all this, you just throw it back in the tank, or you throw it back in your bag, okay, and you just, you don't want to waste your wax, because, it's not cheap. I mean, it only hurts when you run out and you got to buy more. But see, here's that cross. All right, now look, here's the mold. Look, you see, there's some flashing around there on here. That flashing was so thin it just came right off when I lifted that. But see, there's a little bit of flashing. See, there's a tiny little vent I put on there. Now when you start making molds, you got to learn about how you make your molds. You got to put your sprues in your vents, and you got to get those. You got to understand sprues and vents, okay, which I'll cover all that when we start talking about making all these molds. But I love these cheaper molds. They're good for any part that you can cast in sand, in a sand mold. You can make this type of mold for that part, okay? Like this part here, look, that's a nice piece. That's a real nice piece. I can make a nice, good cheap rubber mold for that. And I mean, it's quick. I mean, I can make the mold in less than 15 minutes, start to finish, and it's instant. And in 15 minutes, I'll be running parts off of these. These are just silicone that you buy in just 100% silicone caulk that you buy for $4, $5 a tube at Walmart. Now I'll show you how that works. It's simple and easy. But any part that doesn't have any draft on it, okay? And what I mean by draft is negative draft, okay? What I mean by that is undercut. If there's any undercuts, well, like to a point, it's okay because this is rubber, but like if it's a big heavy part and there's a lot of undercuts, it's not real good for these type of molds. Just like, sand casting is pretty much, you don't really use parts that have undercuts on them. You pretty much use, straight, positive draft a little bit. You angle it down a little bit, but I'll cover all that later. This is about the wax injector. But yeah, it's really pretty straightforward and simple. I mean, you hook your airline to it, you fill it with wax, turn it on, heat it up, and you can play with the temperature, and you'll know when it's shooting about right. And depending on your molds, all molds are different, so it just really depends. Like some of these molds, I'll shoot them up a little bit higher. Some of them a little bit lower. The real small, tiny ones, you can shoot them with probably 2 pounds of pressure is fine. A little bigger one like this cross here, maybe. I got mine, I think, like 5 pounds, and I pretty much leave it there unless I have something that ain't coming out, and then I'll adjust the pressure. But okay, that's it for part number 2. Go ahead and click on part number 3, and we're going to be talking about making some wax trees and getting them in a flask and getting ready to cast some jewelry.